All right, today I'm going to go over how to do your pose. I'm only going to go over one pose, but that process will be the same for the other two poses as well. It's just a matter of obviously positioning them in that other pose. This is an example rendering. You don't need to do it with like a background like I have here. This is just another thing that you can do just to make it look a little bit more in scene, okay? So I'm going to close that. Before I close this, the render time on this image, which is a 3000 by 4000 image, is an hour and a half, okay? So the bigger you get these images, the longer they are going to take to render out. I'm going to close that, and then I'm going to save my stuffs. So I'm always going to start, every single pose I do will start from that original file I made last class, which is my ready to pose, okay? This is basically, he's in that T position. He's in a standard stock pose. It's usually best to start from there anytime we're doing anything. So when we do our walk cycle, when we do our animation, when we do anything, we're always going to jump to this file first, save it as something, and then work on it from there. That way, every pose we're ready to start from that spot. Here's my Pinterest page. This is the pose that I was going for. So this is a photography pose. Men's relaxed fit jeans, $17 at Target. That's a pretty good price. So I'm going to use my character here. Something to note, last class I did set up a keyframe way at -50. So if I were to move something and then adjust my timeline, notice that it jumps, okay? So you want to be aware of that because lots of times people will go and put their entire character into a pose, adjust their timeline, and boom, it snaps back to that thing, okay? So just be aware that if there is a keyframe, you want to make sure that you override it or set a new keyframe so that you have them locked in that pose. So I'm going to switch to my Jerry character set. I'm going to save this as, and I'm going to call this Sarcona Ray Pose 1 Demo. And make sure it's a Maya ASCII so that it works. And then yes. And Ray is like a super slow saving file. There's something going on in there where it does take him forever. I also did discover this about Ray, is that if I go to my panel's perspective, there's actually a Ray camera. And if I go there, there's all of his facial controls. So when I accidentally zoomed way far away and I couldn't find my character, usually what happens is all the controls for his face are actually like really far away with the camera pointed at him. And you would use this as a way to animate the facial features. So I would typically go into my layouts and I would do like two panes side by side. This one would have his perspective view. So I'm doing, let's say, you know, working on his face here. And on this side, I'm going through, oops, and grabbing the correct stuff. Maybe not. No. Well, then why do you have it there? I can't move any of it, so I don't know why they have that there. Typically, you'd be able to grab these things and move them like that, but I can't move anything. So maybe Ray's just kind of broke a little bit. He's been hurt, I guess. All right, so just ignore Ray for now. All right, so to get to the actual pose part of this, it helps to have the props in there that you're going to use if they're interacting. If he's sitting in a chair, if he's leaning against something, obviously in this case, it helps to have some sort of prop. It also looks like this is, it looks like a pole, but it looks like it's also slanted, which is kind of weird. I don't know if that's just the angle, like the guy was not as slanted and they slanted the photo or what they did, but that definitely looks like it's on some sort of slant. I'm going to go vertical with it and ignore that weird slant. So I'm going to put in a ground plane. And make that huge. And then I'm going to put in a pole. That looks like roughly the same size. Now, if you had something like, let's say he's sitting in a chair and you don't want to model a chair, This is an animation class. You're not required to actually model anything like that for the class. You can use a website called TurboSquid. There's other ones out there. You can register for an account. You can type in the word chair. You can set your price to free because that's the best price. And then you can find an appropriate chair that you would want to use, download it, and import it into your scene. Okay? So if he's sitting on this kind of chair, then you could use that as it. Okay? That way you don't have to worry about modeling a chair and spending time doing that. If you're in the modeling class, ignore this website. Don't use the website at all. Cool. So I have my prop here, and then I want to position him first, kind of like where his general, body is. So I'm going to grab this big locator at the bottom and just move his whole character over. This is where I can scale him if I need to. I can position him. I can rotate him if I need to. This is just a good way to get him kind of in that spot. I could have also just grabbed this and moved that over. Either one is acceptable. All right, so what I'm going to do first is I kind of look at the overall character. I want to look at the hips. I want to look at the shoulders. I want to look at the legs. I want to see where his weight-bearing leg is. And all of those things I'm kind of looking at to see how this pose is going in. So it looks like his hips here are slanted downwards like this. His shoulders are also slanted downward, and his support leg is right here, and it's actually kind of like bowed out some. Okay, so this leg I'm going to leave right about there. I will probably adjust it. His hips are rotated, and this is not leaning against that. Okay, there is definitely a gap between these two things where his hand comes in next to his body. So I'm going to lean it a little bit. Now he's counterbalancing his weight with his spine. So his spine is actually, his legs go this way and then his spine is going upward. So we have kind of this like arc, this line of action going from here up and kind of like at an angle. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to go to his spine controls here and here. I'll give him a little bit of rotation. There we go. Not much, just a little bit. I'm going to also, just so I can get a better visual, kind of move this foot over, kind of rotate that. And he's on like his toe. Now, while you're getting him into the position, they might look just weird, just all over weird. But the idea is just kind of ignore it. It's sticking through the ground a little bit, so let's move that up. And this is the potty pose because his legs are too close together, so he doesn't have to go potty. So we're going to give him a little bit more room. Okay, I need a little bit more room, so I'm just actually going to grab his hips and just push him down some. There we go. Okay, now watch this leg here. If I pull this up too straight, see how it's like locking out and stretching? You always want to avoid that in a character because it'll look like the leg is locked out. So I want to make sure there's, just a smidge of a bend, if anything, there, like that. Okay, it's barely a bend. And this little knee constraint will go over this way. I think his hips are probably maybe a little bit too rotated, so we'll go there. I think this could probably be adjusted a little bit further here. Okay, his proportions and my character's proportions are not the same. I'm not going to get them the same. I just have to create the pose for my character. He's also obviously crossing his legs, so we're just going to pull that over here, push this more in front. There we go. So now we're getting more of the same kind of pose that he would be getting. If it helps, get in the pose that the character is doing, and you'll kind of understand what the hips are doing, what the shoulders are doing, and all of that. All right, so that's good. So I'm going to get the arms into their position. Before I do, I'm going to just deselect everything. I'm on my Jerry character set. I'm going to hit S. At any point, remember, if I were to advance that timeline, everything jumps back. So it took me a couple minutes. It might take you a couple minutes more. So I just want to set that key so I don't accidentally undo something. Now I'm going to grab the shoulder, and I'm going to rotate the shoulder down. So I'm using FK to do that. Now this looks very blocky. His shoulders are, perfectly straight across, and they wouldn't be. This shoulder is down like this, so his shoulder blade, or his collarbone, would also be kind of down like that as well. He also has, he's kind of like leaning a little bit back, so his right arm is forward, so his spine is actually twisted a little bit. So his left shoulder is actually pushed back a little bit, okay? So not only am I going to go, down like this, I'm also going to push this back a little bit. Now I'm going to go to the shoulder here, give this a little bit of rotate there, give this a little bit of rotate there, give this a little bit of rotate. Again, the proportions are not the same, so you kind of have to like fudge it a little bit. Let's rotate this. And he doesn't have a pocket or pocket to put his thumb in, so I'm just going to put his thumb like inside of his body. Rotate that a bit. Rotate this. Okay, now this is where I'm trying to line this up, because as I move this up, well, now his hand is basically missing that waistline. So I have to pull this back, grab this, rotate that up, grab this, and you'll see me switch between rotate and selection, because that's the only way to really get the right tools. Maybe I will rotate this up a little bit more. That might be down some. There we go. And then I'll rotate the shoulder back a little bit. All right, that's like a weird pose. I need to bring this more in front, like that. And his hand looks weird. I definitely need to fix that. The hands being too stiff is something you definitely want to adjust. I'm going to go into his knuckles if I can grab them. And I'm just going to go like one finger at a time and just like give it a little bit of rotation, like he's actually like resting his hand on his jeans, not through his jeans. Whoop, grab the hip. There we go. I'm going to grab the little cube on top. I'm going to go to spread, and I'm just going to adjust the spread of this some. There we go. And then I'm going to nudge this over a little bit like that. I'm going to save. I'm going to set a keyframe. And again, not that that took me a long time to do, but I just don't want to have to redo that. So I'm going to set keyframes and save often. All right, so now this hand here, his shoulders are pretty much down. So I think both of these shoulder blades are going to come down some. He looks like a defeated man, right? I'll pull this here. This arm is more out front, not much, but a little bit. So maybe we'll just give this a little rotation forward some. Bring this up. Bless you. Give that a little bit of rotation. And then I'm going to grab all the fingers. What else did I grab? The ground. There we go. And I'm going to throw a cube into his hands just so I have something to use for placement. It looks weird if you don't have something there, because then it's like, what is he staring at? There we go. So I'm using my snapping tools to snap it, and then I'm just going to line this up. And he has his phone vertically, yes. Now, this is a good idea to kind of get the phone in the spot that you want the phone to be, and then put his hand in there, right? So I know, like, okay, that looks like a good spot. Maybe rotate it back some so he's looking up at it, or down at it. There we go. And then I can kind of customize the hand to get it into that position. Okay, or at least get it close and then tweak it from there. I think I want to take his elbow out a bit. I want to rotate this, then grab the elbow, and rotate that, then grab the wrist, rotate that, there we go. And again, I'm not trying to match this, pixel for pixel. I'm just trying to get the gist of what he's doing and get my character to look like he's also doing it. It's a long phone. Let's shrink that down. There we go. All right. And back to the wrist, a little rotation. Little rotation. There we go. And then I'm going to give him a little bit more rotation on these fingertips, just to help wrap it around more, like he's holding the phone some more. That's good. And now he's looking, obviously, in front of us. He needs to look at his camera. So I'm going to go over here. I found that this one is my main neck one for rotation, but I can't rely just on that because that doesn't look natural. I need to use all three of these to rotate the head and make it feel more realistic. Now all three will not rotate the same amount. I'm going to start off here and give this a little bit of rotation. Now I'll go to the next one a little bit, and I'll go to the next one a little bit there. I think on this one I can actually pull his head forward a little bit too. Sometimes his neck gets a little bit too like crunchy, like it's like squished or something. I think this too, I can maybe just give that a little bit of rotation. There we go. Okay, then I'm going to move his eyes down to the phone. And then I'm going to go into here and just nudge these down. It's a provocative phone call. A little smirk. There we go. All right, so let's set a keyframe. Let's save. Okay, that's the gist of my pose. I want to then render it out, and I want to then start comparing. The quicker you're able to get just the basic fleshed out, this is what the pose is supposed to look like, the quicker you can start looking at how do the legs look, how does the pose look. It should feel the same way that this one feels. It feels like he's leaning. It feels like all of his weight is on that base foot. It feels like all the weight in his upper body is against that shoulder. It should still feel like that in our pose, okay? All right, so I'm going to throw in some lights here. Super simple lights. If you just throw in a sky dome, that's typically all you really need. If I hit render, you'll see that's a pretty decent lighting setup. Number one, it looks like this foot is floating, so I need to fix that. It also looks like his head is facing forwards, but his eyes are facing left. So I need to adjust his head. And I think I need to give more weight over here. I think I need to fix that leg too. Yeah. I want to push this foot back some more, give this more of a leg kick out. I think I want to squish him down a little bit too. So let's do that. I don't want to lose my phone placement. So I'm going to shift click the phone and just move both at the same time. Okay, a little bit of nudge. I'm going to push this here. I'm going to grab his knee and push this out more. I'm going to rotate this some more. Make sure that he's not, no, he isn't. It's just his tip of his toe is like rotated. Yep, that's not even touching. So I'm just going to scoot this back a little bit. And maybe even it's fine to intersect a little bit, because that way we know that they're making contact. Obviously, if it's too much, then that's not good. And then his head needs to rotate towards the phone. Save again. Should have set my key first, but I'm going to set my key after. Now I have a sky dome here. I have to make sure that I deselect that sky dome before I set my key. Otherwise, it'll just set a keyframe on the sky dome. There you go. So that feels much better than the previous one did. Cool. All right, so I could tweak that a little bit more, but I think that's going to be good. Cool. So that's good. I'm going to go to my render settings. Once I'm happy with this, I'm going to make sure this is set to Arnold. For whatever reason, the defaults are always off. So it'll be in Maya software. It might be, you know, Turtle sometimes. That's another one that could pop up. And then I want to render these out at the correct size, which I believe was 3000 by 2400 is what I told you, right? Or 2400 by 3000, depending on which aspect ratio makes more sense. Vertical, he's more vertical, so I'm going to go vertical. And then I would go to my Arnold render, and I would crank up my settings. If I look at what that render looks like, oh, come on. I'm going to shrink this down so I can manage it a bit better during the lecture. There it is. Way too far away, number one. Let's fix that. Let's go to our resolution gate. Let's go to view, let's go to camera settings, and I'm going to say vertical. Now this is what's going to render whatever's in here. So I'm going to squeeze them a lot closer, push this off to the side, there we go. And then we'll render it again. Cool. So in here I have two things that are contributing to what my render looks like. I have my diffuse, which is the color of it, and I have my specularity, which is the reflections. So if I'm going to adjust any of these properties in the quality settings, these three are the only ones I need to play with. So this is the overall, so that will do specular and diffuse. And then if I need to just do diffuse or just do specular, I can do that too. So in this one, I'm pretty sure that I can simply just adjust. There we go. Simply adjust this camera one because I don't really have any major noise in the other areas. And you can see his thumb is like hidden, so it kind of looks like it's in the belt anyway. We just have to fake that. So this doesn't look like it's very noisy at all. So I think that would be pretty good. If I saw something on here that looked like, you know, crazy amounts of noise, I would adjust that. Probably go, number one, I need to assign Arnold shaders to it. That's why there's a little bit of noise on those. But I'd most likely just up my diffuse to, let's say, 4, and that should take care of any of the noise that would be on that. I can also adjust what my character looks like. So if I just click on my character's shirt, hit Control A, way far down here, here's his shirt, here's the color of his shirt, and then there's blue, much better looking. And then there's the pants, click on the color. There you go, the army pants, there we go, cool. All right, so we're going to pretend that that's good. Then I would go to my rendering settings, make sure this is at 2400 by 3000. What? And then I would just do my regular render. Okay, now once it's done, I go up here to File, and then I just say Save Image. And it thinks. I would call this Arcona character. And I'm going to save it as a TIFF. Did you save? I should have gone in here, Arcona character TIFF. Let's open that in Photoshop. And there he is. Boom. Okay, so that's what you'll do for all three of your poses. Get him in the pose, make sure it works, render it out, and then save it. This is still rendering. I saved it early, but that bigger size is going to take a bit more time to do. Now, if you decided that you wanted to actually like put them in an environment, you wanted to use a background image and make it look like they're in that environment, I found this on Google Images. It's a free image. It was royalty free I could use. It's a huge image. So this image itself is actually 3,000 by 4,000 pixels, which is plenty big for what I'm doing. I wouldn't want to grab a small image because when I render it, it's going to render out big. It'll stretch it out. So I'm going to go create a brand new camera. New camera. I'm going to go to View. I'm going to go to Image Plane. I'm going to import that image. So I put that inside my source images. Here's the image. And there's the image right there. Now, one thing I noticed on Ray is that under the Show menu, he actually had a lot of stuff that was turned off. So if Image Planes was not visible, I wouldn't be able to see that. Okay? So I want to make sure that if I'm not seeing something, that I definitely turn that on. I think he also had lights off here, so make sure your lights are on. So now this image plane is what's going to be my background. Now you'll see there's a spot that it like cuts through. So if I go to the depth, I can just push this back. Okay, so it's way in the distance. It doesn't matter where it's at right now. It just needs to be behind him. Then I'm going to go to wireframe. Go to my resolution gate, hit Control A, and I'm just going to say to fit this to the resolution gate. Oops. Fill, there we go. Fit it to fill, there we go, and then resolution gate. Now I have this ground, and so now if I look at my grid that I've laid down, this is not right. He's at a different perspective than the rest of it. I hit 5, you can see we have a big perspective going backwards, but he's like facing down. So I'm going to use my wireframe and kind of line it up so that it makes more sense. And I'm actually going to bring him pretty close to that. You can see how that line and this line are actually pretty close to lining up. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect, but we just want to get it close. I'm also going to go back to my camera settings and say fill this. And then I have to go back to my resolution gate and say fill. There we go. Okay, now I do have a little bit of wiggle room here, so I don't have to get it like perfect, but I think that's pretty good right there. Cool. Let me go in here to my renderer. Let me take this down to a different size. Okay, and I'm just taking this down so that it renders fast for us. And as you're testing things out, you want to do that. If I render it like this, what we're going to get is just like that, like we had before. I'm going to take my HDR and I'm going to turn the visibility off. So camera visibility on the HDR goes away. Okay, now again, just so you can see what it's going to look like at each stage. Now it looks like that. Now we need to get the ground to be transparent. So I'm going to go click the ground, go to my lighting and shading, assign a new material, and I'm going to assign a AI shadow matte. And what this is going to do is it's going to use that background image as my shadow catcher. So when I go and render this, that'll be transparent, but any shadows that I have will cast on the ground here. So now it looks like he's in that view. Now we're not seeing any shadows because my HDR dome is just like it's too soft of a light. We're not really getting any shadows because light's really coming from everywhere. He also really doesn't fit in the scene anyway. He's kind of like dark. So I'm going to switch cameras so I don't ruin this one. Turn that off. There we go. And I'm just going to add an Arnold area light. Make this big, rotate it like so. Jump back to that perspective one. And shrink the light down some, because that's now too big. We're not seeing any shadow still. Oops. Oh, we're also not bright enough. Let's make that brighter. There it goes. Okay, so now we're getting a shadow on these two items. Now I can go into my light, go in the attribute editor, and I can tone down the shadow color or the shadow density. So let's say I take it down to that. Oops. Actually, my preferred method, which I thought I did, but then I undid it, is to just scale this light up. That's what I want to do. There we go. So scaling the light up, that will take the shadow and make it softer and more diffused. There we go. Nice. And it should make sense. There's no reason for a shadow to be coming from in front of him. That shadow should really be coming from above him. I thought I was above enough, but I'm not. So I'm going to go more above. Like that. And I'm going to take my sky dome intensity and just make that a little bit brighter, 1.5. It doesn't look bad, but I just want it to have a little bit more contrast in there. Oops, hit play, that's why it's not updating. Sometimes I'll just keep updating. I'm like, yeah, looking better, a little bit better. And I'm like, no, it hasn't even updated. 1.25 maybe? No, I think 1.5 was a good number. I think that's pretty good there. All right, and then I could just render that out at the full size, save that image, and then I would have that together. And this feels a little bit more complete, obviously, than just leaving it on that blank stage. But again, it's all in what you're trying to get across, right? Obviously, finding the right image for this was, it took me a few minutes to do. Cool. So then again, take these up. So this was 5, this was 4. I'll just make that 3 just for fun. Oops. 2400 by 3000. And then I would hit render, and then it would go an hour and a half, and then it would be done. Save it as a TIFF. I'm good to go. Okay, so that process will be the same for every single one of your poses. We're doing 3 of these. So next week will be workday and workday. One of those days I'll go over the next assignment, but we won't have a big lecture or anything. Questions? No? All right. It would be the same thing, so we would just get more into the face, right? So if the emotion is sadness, you may not even see the face. It may all just be from the gesture that he's doing, right? So then you would just focus on the body. Some of your characters will have, if I can not do that. Some of your characters will have, more of that, say surprised look. Right? So I have to go in here and just really try to look at the face, just like I looked at the whole body, and try to figure out what is making this work. What makes the character look like they're surprised? And then going through and tweaking all of these things. Nope, that's terrified. Yep, that's it. And then some controls, like these ones here, sometimes they've rigged it so when you grab opposite sides, it automatically will move them in the correct direction. This one did not, so I'd have to grab each one of these individually. And so I'm just nudging these in more, thinking about as I open my mouth, my cheeks go in. So I just want to give a little bit less volume there. And then again, you can kind of, really work some of these things. I'm going to pull these ones down. Right? And all in the kind of frightened he would be at this point. And then some will even have controls for the pupil. Maybe he does. Yes, he does. Look at that. Pupil size. They're different sizes. And there's iris size. Oh my God. That's the worst text message in the world. Let's just take this down. It might be. He got the wrong image sent to him. Perspective. There he goes. Yeah. Right, and obviously more work. The nostrils should be flared. The jaw should be, mouth should be open more.
Now, when you grab the wire frame to move the whole image, you're repositioning it for the photo setup.
Yep.
So do it in perspective.
I'm just moving my camera around regular.
Oh.
That's all I'm doing. So I'm not actually physically moving the geometry. I'm just holding Alt and middle mouse button to move it this way, and then rotate the camera, and then zooming in and out. Just trying to get that line to get lined up.
Right.
The trickiest thing is just those stupid camera settings. Let's go back into perspective. Let me turn this off. None. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to go back in perspective 2, and you'll see this process. You're animating something, texturing something, or modeling something. You import an image. There it is. Push the depth back. So if I'm modeling a car, I would actually have a front view, side view, top view that I've been imported into each one of those cameras. And then I have to make sure that my resolution gate is on. I have to make sure that my camera is fitting. So I went down here to fill. That way my resolution gate fills that box. And you'll see they're not the exact proportions, which is why I went to the attribute editor and I told it to fit to resolution gate and to fill so that it fills the resolution gate. And now it lines up. You can see it goes over here and it goes over there. The fill here is no different than the horizontal in this case because they're doing the same thing. It's basically saying whichever dimension is the smallest, fit that one so that there is some overlap on the other sides. If I went to best, it does that. If I went to vertical, it's going to do that. Okay? Oops, vertical. There you go. It's going to do the exact same thing. So as long as I have this on fill, resolution gate, it fits in the border, we're good to go. And then just adjusting your camera to line it up. This is actually a pretty simple one because we're not really having him interact with any of the geometry in the scene. If I were to, let's say I went here, I'm going to pretend that he's leaning up against this thing here. Okay, so that's pretty close. I'm going to take this and I'm going to change this into the shadow mat as well. Now what should happen is it should use that cylinder as a shadow mat, casting a shadow on that box. Way off. Let's go back to perspective 2. There we go. And so now it kind of looks like he's leaning against that. I would have to adjust it some, but you get the idea. If I was going to have my character walking down the street, I could actually have that street and have him just walking and make it look like he's walking down the street. Have we watched Going to the Store yet?